Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Who I Became podcast. And for those of you that are new here, my name is Simon Osamoh and I'm your host. And you can join me every Thursday for conversations with both interesting and fascinating people who share with me their personal stories and experiences that have helped them become the person they are today. Then my hope is that they'll provide you with inspiration and motivation to lead your own life of significance. Now, if my conversations resonate with you, all I ask is that you like and share with someone in your circle of influence. Now, today I'm joined by Kevin Haggerty. Kevin describes himself as a patriot, single dad, entrepreneur, teacher, and pastor of a church in Florida. Now, having battled through addiction in his late teens, Kevin went on to become a successful entrepreneur, but he found that his financial success gave him more problems. He looked around one day and realized that money had become his master, and he actually had few real friends in his life.
Welcome to the Who I Became podcast.
Well, I'm pleased today to be joined with Pastor Kevin Haggerty. How are you doing, Kevin?
I'm doing well, buddy. How are you? It's good to see you.
I'm very well. I always say that you're the pastors that I love because you have this real life experience that we're going to get into.
Okay. Glad to do it.
Yeah, but there's some pastors that I come across that have boats and nice cars, and you sort of see them in the nice suits, and maybe it's just how I internally process it. But I'm often thinking, someone like you, Kevin, we'll get into with the adversity that you faced and the challenge you had to overcome. You're just a real pastor. Maybe I'll just talk a bit about some of the things that you do. So, you're the pastor at Next Level Church in Tampa Bay, Florida. So it's most probably 95 degrees down there and humid.
Yeah, it's terrible. I should say I'm one of the pastors here. We have 3 speaking pastors here.
Yeah,
I'm just one of them.
Hopefully your air conditioning's working down there, Kevin.
Yeah, not well, but well enough.
Well enough.
It's nice in the studio, at least. I should sleep out here.
Oh, there you go. I know you preach the gospel in prisons within Florida. And I know you haven't been doing that as much in recent years, but we'll talk about the God Logic project in a moment, and that tends to be a sort of bigger outreach for you these days. But you're the founder of God Logic Project. You run a successful podcast which is on YouTube and Facebook and all the main outlets, which focuses on addiction, recovery, politics. I think you like to say there's no subject that you won't touch, Kevin. Is that right?
Yeah, I think that the point of the God Logic Project is to break the intellectual bubble. So people that don't agree with me are just as welcome to be on the show as people who do agree with me. We've got to be very careful. We've fallen into the pattern of people say on the left only talk to people on the left, and people on the right only talk to people on the right. So their ideas sound brilliant because everybody's in agreement, right? There's no challenge to your thought. Here, hopefully, everybody gets a seat at the table and every thought is challenged.
Yeah, that's very true. Very true. And one of the things that we're just talking about this off air is that you actually quit alcohol. You're an addict at 21. You've sort of been in recovery ever since. And I was saying to you that in today's world, 21 seems to be sort of quite young. But addictions have changed during that time. There's a lot more chemical dependency and stuff now than of your generation when it was real alcoholism. And we'll get into a bit later. So, when did you realise you were an alcoholic? And I know that at 37 there was a suicide attempt which really changed the trajectory of your life, and that's what really pushed you into now ministry, which led you to be one of the 3 pastors at your church. So welcome to the show, Kevin.
Well, thank you. That's pretty much my life in a nutshell, what you just said. That's pretty much how it lays out. Well, I got your life in 4 or 5 bullet points, so that's always a good way. Any more than that, people don't necessarily start believing it. It's like, no, this person's done too much. But I guess, one of the things I'll say, Kevin, is I don't know, I stumbled across your podcast online, and I know we've got a mutual friend in Jim Howard down in Florida, but, I stumbled across it. A great guy. And actually, he's been on the show. I just got off the phone with him a little while ago.
Oh, there you go.
He's doing well.
And I stumbled across you, and it was just, I don't know what I can say. I was just, I couldn't put your podcast down. I must have watched 3 or 4 episodes back to back. In my wife's family, there's been a lot of addiction, a lot of chemical dependency, and it really struck a chord with me. And I love your compassion and your heart in it. And so one thing I say is, when you realise that you're an alcoholic at 21, I guess my question is, at what point did it start where your drinking got out of control?
Well, I started very, very early, and I started getting in trouble very early. But back in those days, you're talking about the 80s, the late 70s, early 80s. It was more of like the nuns told my parents. I went to Catholic school, and the nuns told my parents I wasn't smart enough to go to college. So what was a behavior problem or an attention deficit problem maybe was interpreted back in those days as just not being a very bright kid. So and my parents, being Irish Catholic, took their word as gospel. So I know that I can tell you that when I was 16 years old, I had the choice of going to a place called Daytop Village, which is like Boys Town in New York City, okay. Or I can go to AA I can go to a 12-step program for 1 week. And so that was an easy choice, right? I'll go to meetings and eat cake and drink coffee for a week. Yeah. And they picked me up at the house and dropped me off too. So it was an easy choice to make, because the alternative was to shave my head and rake leaves till they feel like I'm rehabilitated. So I did that. And I can tell you at 16, I could really relate to grown men, 40, 50-year-old men, even older, that had a lot of the same problems I had. So I had a lot of adult problems as a kid, you might say: smoking, drinking, gambling, fighting,
drinking and drugging. Stealing. I think you said before. I love it when you say that, drinking and drugging.
Yeah, drinking and drugging. It's 2 of the 4 horses of my apocalypse, as we'll uncover, are going to be drugs and alcohol.
And so I guess, so that's just sort of the story. But then maybe talk about the post-addiction very quickly, because I don't know, I haven't found it that common where someone even at 21 can just say, okay, I'm done with drinking, and then move on. And at that point, like you say, you were raised in New York. When you stopped drinking, you moved down to Florida. At that point, at 21 years old, what allowed you to just say, okay, that's it, no more from today?
Well, I could tell you that I had gone AA at 16. So by 21, I had enough. I knew for those 5 years were absolutely terrible. The last 2 of those 5 years, I wanted to die every day. I was disappointed that I woke up. I mean, I don't have to shave yet, by the way, and I'd rather be dead than alive. So I'm spiritually dead, we would say in ministry. Yeah. So it was not it wasn't a secret in my neighborhood or in my family what I was. To me, it just didn't seem like guys like me live very long anyway. Why worry about it? The streets or the booze and drugs are going to get me one way or another. And I wanted to die. So January 25th, 1989, I went out to lunch with my buddy Eddie, and I said, I'm not going to drink. So we went to a bar for lunch, and I thought if I just have tap beer and a hamburger, nothing's going to go wrong. And literally, that's the last thing I remember. And that was the last day I drank, and things went horribly bad for about 24 hours. It was terrible.
Yeah. Well, and I want to pick up on something that you said on there, and maybe you didn't say it in a flippant way, because I know you, it's just how your life has gone, but you just said, I wanted to die anyway, and then you very quickly moved on. So do you mind if we just come back and unpack that a little bit? So you're a young man, and what was your upbringing like? Why was life so bad, sort of maybe in your mental health, that you were sort of thinking then that, my life is going to end by drink, by drugs, or by some other type of violence?
Yeah, some type of violence. Well, I came from a good family, by the way. I went out of my way to get in trouble, if that makes sense. Now, was I kind of the black sheep of the family? Certainly, I have 4 brothers and sisters, all who did very well in life. My dad used to say I have 4 good kids and Kevin. I was impressed with kind of the neighborhood bad guy lifestyle. I went out of my way to hang out with those guys. So and I made the choices I made, even though I was a kid. I have to own those choices. So I had every opportunity. I went to what was essentially an Ivy League high school in New York City, and got kicked out after 2 years, and but I had every possible opportunity I could have had, or anybody would want to have. But I mean, I just didn't take advantage of it. What I wanted to do was go 1,000 miles an hour and be popular and be cool and have money. and we had money, and I was from a poor family in a nice neighborhood, and so the fact that we had no money really stuck out. We were Irish in an Italian neighborhood. That really stuck out, So I think what drove me more than anything was ego, right? I wanted to have money. I wanted to have status. I wanted people to like me. And that's what I got by being a bad guy.
Well, I was going to mention, your later, the sort of suicide attempt occurred when you're, around 37, and you're now a pastor. A pastor's really a counselor for other people. But do you look back at that time when you were so young, thinking I might have had some mental illness as well, or do you just think, was it just brokenness that you just didn't really have I really don't care attitude, or do you think there was some mental illness at the time that you were struggling to deal with?
Well,
what's your experience told you?
Even back then, there had to be some degree of mental brokenness, right? So it wasn't. It was a spiritual problem, but it should have made intellectual sense to me, and it didn't. So, but I can tell you that if I lacked anything as a kid, I lacked structure. Both of my parents worked, so we kind of came and went as I pleased. Got to do what I want, so by the time. Fast forward 17 years, I'm 37 or 38 years old, and I'm gonna kill myself, really for the second time, and it was low self-esteem. In other words, I had come to think so little of myself after the first 17 years of my recovery. I didn't do the things that other people do to not just to quit drinking and drugging, but to become a better person. So you sober up a horse thief, you still got a horse thief, right? You still got to stop stealing horses. I became a better person, but I really by no measure became a good person. So God saved me. I look at it this way. God saved me at 21, and I treated that gift, that second chance, like a croquet sweater from my grandmother. I looked at it, I appreciated it, I folded it, put it in the closet, and never touched it again. And then 17 and a half years later, sober, I'm going to kill myself over money. And so that is clearly my priorities spiritually were way out of order.
Yeah, and I can't remember. I know I wrote down the quote from you, but it was really what you just said is that you battled your addiction at 21, but you didn't get well.
Right, I didn't get any better. So what I did was replace drugs and alcohol with my ability to make money. And I've always been in construction, literally since I was 13 years old for the most part, which is against the law. So we won't mention who I worked for. But
well, you might have been in New York back then, Kevin.
Yeah, okay, nothing was against the law back then.
That's in New York, yeah.
So, at this point, I had owned my own plumbing company, and I was making more money than I knew what to do with. I mean, $4 or $5 grand a week, and I had friends and I had employees. I had employees and I had customers, but I'm halfway through my life and I don't have a friend in the world, right? Even estranged from my wife, who I was still married to and living with, but we didn't really speak to each other on a personal level at all. We were partners in raising kids, but that's what our marriage had become. So I'll tell you the story if you want me to.
Because the quote that I put down was, a god of money. You had many customers, but few friends. And that really struck me when we spoke. So maybe we'll talk about you building that business up. And then when you had that realization that you're in this big house, you've got all this money, but there's no one around there to share it with. Because again, these are those type of moments that we all have in life, searching for that belonging. And you had what a lot of people have perceived that they wanted, but you had it and you were still lonely by it.
Yeah, so by earthly standards, certainly I was successful. I had a house, I owned my own company, I was making plenty of money. I had gotten hurt, and getting hurt, unfortunately, is a story of my life 3 or 4 times, including now I'm fully disabled. I was hurt, and I didn't have control over my business anymore. I could barely get out of the bed for months, and I'm losing everything, and I'm losing everything in an earthly sense. And I can tell you the story. At 10:45 in the morning, I'm sitting on the end of my bed, and I'm white as a sheet. My eyes are bloodshot, and I'm rubbing my hands like this in desperation and angst. I had pills in the cabinet that I didn't take from my bad back because I'm a drug addict, right? So it would be stupid for me to take those, but I still had them. I decided sitting on that bed, I need to take them to calm my nerves a little bit because I'm really starting to get out of control, starting to get desperate. And I went in the bathroom and I put a couple in my hand, and then I'm like, my kids are probably better off if I'm gone. I have money. I mean, I have insurance. They'll have money. They'll get a better father. I tried this world. I tried the way everybody else lives, and I'm just not cut out for it. Obviously, with my story in life, I was never cut out for this world. I just was never fully successful in a sense. And so I put all the pills, the whole jar in my hand, and I was just going to end it. And nobody home, nothing there to stop me. And I put them back in the jar and I put them away. And by 11:45, an hour later, I'm sitting on the end of the bed, wringing my hands in joy, and I have no one to tell it to. I have no one to call. I have no one to talk to about it. In fact, I called my now ex-wife at work, and I tried to tell her what God had just done for me, and I must have sounded crazy, of course, and I could hear her rolling her eyes over the phone. And that night, I went to a 12-step meeting, and I started going to meetings 2 or 3 times a day. I did the things that I never did. I got a sponsor. I prayed. I did the steps. I read the literature. I was honest with people, and I used to lie to my wife about where I was so I can go to 2 meetings. So I would lie to my customers and say I got to go pick up material so I could run and go to a meeting, then go back and finish working. So I was a liar, but in a desperate way, for a good reason. And I was that's 15 years ago, right? And 16 years ago, and I've been plugged into the recovery process and program ever since. So I made every single mistake you could possibly make in recovery in the first 17 years, except for I didn't drink and I didn't drug. You know, I wanted to kill myself, but besides that, I didn't drink and I didn't drug.
So I guess, Kevin, the intriguing piece of that story is about, you had wealth, you had a nice house, and like you say, you're making $20,000 a month, and more money than you can spend. Mm-hmm. But how did that change your personality? I know you said there was a big difference between the old Kevin and who you are now, as in, you weren't very nice to people, you were angry, you were very much driven by money. Was the money pushing those close to you out of your life, and did that become your God?
Well, it was how I communicated with people. So the only relationships I had were over money. You were either my customer or you were a subcontractor or an employee of mine. When my family wanted something, I gave them money. Every relationship, every interaction I had with people centered around money. I had never. I was angry. I was driven by ego. I would tell you, driven by low self-esteem, false pride. I would get out of my plumbing truck with Kevin Haggerty plumbing shirt on and a Kevin Haggerty plumbing truck and punch somebody at a red light because they weren't driving right or they flipped me off or something. Not good for business, by the way. That's bad marketing. I wasn't drinking, I wasn't drugging, I was just still crazy. And I think I had a lifetime of stuff to work out, and that second time God saved me. I'll be honest with you, brother. I wasn't worth saving the first time. So I was not a kind of bad kid. I was a monster, and God saved me anyway. And then I took that gift and I wasted it, and he saved me again. And I knew that day. I didn't become a Christian that day, but I knew that day that God had done those 2 things for a reason. It's just up to me to figure out what that reason is.
Yeah, and I know there was a story that you told me about the film, The Case for Christ, where, it is based on someone who is a journalist and a non-believer. His wife starts to believe, and he goes out to try and disprove, sort of Jesus Christ and the resurrection, and he can't do it, basically, and he goes on to become a believer himself. And I know there was a story where you watched this film and you said it made you inquisitive, and then you're ringing friends and you're asking all these questions, they'd answer something, but then you'd ask another question. So maybe we'll talk about those defining moments, because it is quite powerful that a film based on someone who doesn't believe also plays into your story as well.
Well, I can tell you that I might have had a head start because I had respect for Christianity. In other words, I thought it was good for you people, I didn't need to do it, right? Yeah. You guys are just a little weaker than I am. I thought that if I quit drinking and drugging and toughen up a little bit, everything should be fine. So I didn't have to pray and do the steps and any of the things, all the warm and fuzzy things that I ended up disciplining myself to do. But we fast forward 3 or 4 years, and I lost everything. I got divorced. I built it all back up again. My health is back. I'm in another big house with another big pool, and this time I have a live-in girlfriend who's, I don't know, 15 years younger than me. I got a new baby. I'm living in sin. I'm not married. My business is doing well. I have everything again. I'm getting back everything that you could possibly want in life. So I didn't come to Christ on a low point in my life. I wasn't in rehab. I wasn't in prison. I wasn't homeless. I was balling and beginning to ball again. And I in a rare opportunity to be home by myself. My wife or girlfriend was gone, and the kids were gone. And I knew I was going to be home. So on the way home, I got a pizza, a 12-pack of Coke, and I sat down in the living room, and I tended to watch science or history things, nerdy things when I was by myself. And I've always been kind of that guy. So I found a documentary on Netflix called The Case for Christ. And it was, I could dismiss. I watched it while I ate, and halfway through it, I'm sitting up, really paying attention now. And I could dismiss everything, but the proof centered around the resurrection was compelling to me. The at least compelling enough to say that it was more likely that it happened than that it didn't happen. And so I had been a God guy and talking about God, but not church. And I had a lot of buddies, including my son's mother, who recently passed away, and they were all Christians, all want me to go to church, and I would politely say no. And this documentary moved me enough to think, to start researching for myself. And I started calling up all my Christian buddies who wanted me to read this book and go to this church and do this. And I said, hey, what was the name of that book? I would get in the truck in the middle of the night and go get the book from them, drive across town to get the book. And
wow.
I realized about a week into it that something that was very different, that I had been saved. And I went back and looked at the calendar, and it was September 24th, 2010. I didn't realize it at that moment. I wasn't struck by lightning or anything like that. But I heard a guy say that the heart cannot embrace what the mind rejects. And for someone like me, it had to make sense logically first, to some degree, before it could then really begin to work on my heart. So that's when things began to really change. That's when I began to become what I think God has intended me to become all along. So that was a seminal moment in my journey, for sure.
Yeah, and I know, Kevin, you spend a lot of time working with those in addiction. You're now a minister, and the question I'm going to ask you is often a common answer, or an answer that most people say, well, this is what the person's going to say. But a question that I get challenged a lot is, when I hear your story, what is it, or why is it that Kevin can get through these addictions, and then you really had two cracks in it, but then other people can't? And like I said, there's an answer that always springs to someone's mind, but it is often good to get the self-reflection from you as to why do you feel that you can beat addiction and perhaps other people aren't there yet?
Well, I think the misunderstanding people have of addicts is that they have no self-discipline. Certainly, I was somebody that had self-discipline enough to sacrifice to build a business. What we are is we have a spiritual problem, I believe. In fact, the literature for the 12-step programs tell us that we are given a daily reprieve based on the maintenance of our spiritual condition. That one day, maybe next week or next year, but one day the only thing standing between you and a drink is going to be your relationship with your higher power, whatever that means to you. Mine is the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Moses. Mine is the God of the Bible. But I think that the reason that the 12-step programs are so successful, and literally they've saved more lives than penicillin has. Mathematically, yeah, sure. It's exponential. So what's the difference? Well, it's somebody like me teaching me. In other words, if I walked into a 12-step program meeting and it was ink blots and lab coats, and I probably would have grabbed a cup of coffee, stole somebody's wallet, and left, right? But it wasn't that. It was people like me that who legitimately, I didn't realize it at the time, but they legitimately wanted to help me for no other reason except that that's how they stay sober. So that doesn't make sense it didn't make sense to me at the time, but that is the motivation of the 12-step program, is that, and why it's so successful, because if you don't give it away, you don't get to keep it,
Yeah, I started off maybe being a bit too harsh on some of these sort of velvet pastors. I don't know, but it is true that your experience in life and now being a pastor really helps you minister and understand where people are coming from. So I guess if I take my perhaps harshness at the beginning of this podcast, talking about those pastors that have boats and expensive cars and live in 5-bedroom houses, when maybe let's talk about the perception of you during your journey. When you walk into somewhere and they know you as a pastor, and then they hear your story in their journey, is there any change in how people perceive you? The fact that you're a former addict, the fact that you've battled mental illness and you've had some of these other things?
Well, I think that as a pastor, I think that I'm approachable because most people still know me as Kevin the plumber.
Yeah,
not Rev Kev, they call me now. So
that's a good title as well, like Kevin the plumber. That goes well.
Yeah. So they know now that I believe it. They respect that I believe it, and they have questions about it. So I turn in tough circles still, right? I live in a rough neighborhood. My friends are generally rough people. The places I go are places that a lot of pastors wouldn't go. So I think there is an approachability. If I had a leisure suit and a velvet Bible and a Cadillac and rings and everything like that, I don't think that the people that I minister to, I don't think they would give me the time of day. But because I look like them and I ride a Harley and I got tattoos and I sometimes curse and I walk and talk like somebody that's been through a lot, that I think it makes you very approachable to people that are very defensive and very self-protective in their world,
Yeah, and quite often, and it's the same with addiction, and it's the same with those that are, that have a loss or have some type of emptiness. They don't want to necessarily portray that outwardly to someone. So there is that sort of saving the face and stuff as well. So I guess the relatability is most a key point. And what about then in your role as a pastor, having some addictive sort of characteristics, if you like, when you then have to minister those that are battling the same things as you. It could be someone who's on drugs or alcoholism. I mean, how does that challenge your own spirituality and your own recovery?
Well, you have to be careful. We deal a lot with my denomination, Free Methodist. One of the classes that you have to take is centered around spiritual becoming spiritually bankrupt yourself. So there is something called compassion fatigue that is very real in ministry, and particularly in kind of street level ministry. So it may not be very real in ministry if you never actually come up against somebody that has real problems. But I have in seasons of my life got out of my car and thought to myself, people start walking towards me when they see me, and I've literally thought to myself, these emotional black holes are gonna suck the life out of me right now.
Yeah.
I'm not ready for this. So the bottom line is this: you can't fill a cup from an empty vessel. If you don't have it, you're not in position to give it away. And I too, and pastors, even not in recovery, are most effective when someone is pouring into their lives, when someone's filling them. So you cannot fill a cup with an empty vessel, and so it's important that you both pour out into people, and that somebody's pouring into your life in the form of a mentor or a sponsor or some kind of spiritual leader in your life. That's made all the difference. So there is a sustainability that goes along with serving on the level that we serve. Now, I can tell you that there are people that are repulsed by me in terms of a pastor because of my background, and if they get to know my history, they would not pick me for their pastor or their spiritual advisor. But that's fine. It's not the flock that God has me shepherding right now anyway. But some people think their pastor should have been perfect from birth. The only perfect guy in the world they nailed to a cross. So I don't think you want to be perfect.
Yeah, and that is the chat, and that's why I asked you about Christian, because it must be, there is always this sort of maybe like a bias as to what this pastor he or she should be, and then when they meet someone very different. But again, Jesus came for the broken, not for the saints. So I mean, through your life transformation, you're helping so many other people. And I guess we haven't really touched on too much, Kevin, about how you decided to take that walk into ministry and become a pastor. I mean, how did that come about?
Well, I think like a lot of people, when I first got saved, I wanted to wake up one morning and be the Pope. I wanted to be a pastor. And then I wasn't too thrilled with the moral precepts that went along with even being a Christian, never mind being a pastor. So there was an early period early in my walk where I tried to set it aside, put it on a shelf, and I wanted my cake and eat it too. So I'll be honest with you, I was living an adulterous lifestyle. And though not a pastor, I was still a recovery leader, telling people not to live an adulterous lifestyle. While I, 30 minutes ago was. So, and I wasn't caught. It wasn't some kind of scandal that went along with it. There was another seminal moment in my journey where I said, this isn't good enough. And either I'm in or I'm out. Either God's everything or he's nothing. And so I had become, in hindsight now, I think I had become addicted even to sex in my recovery, and the need for a woman to raise, being single with kids, raising a kid by myself. I thought I needed a woman to build a home. I realized a couple of years into it, someone pointed out to me, I said, I just want to make a home for these kids. And they said, you're already doing that. You've been doing that for 2 years. And it dawned on me that they were right, and I had a stereotypical idea of what you got to have a fenced yard, a dog, a pool, all the things I've had in my life, and a woman, and that's not what God has for me and my family, So I became, I started practicing abstinence. I became celibate 4 or 5 years ago now. Yeah, almost 5 years ago, with one fall, I should mention, but ultimately, yeah.
Well, I mean, you've had an incredible journey for sure. And I say, what are those big things that you start learning about yourself? I know your son is a teenager. I mean, what are those fatherly things? You're a leader now within the church. You're a father and a mentor. What are the things you've learned in your life that you try and pass down onto your son and other young kids?
Well, my son's 11, and I still have a daughter that's 14. And then I have 2 grown kids and some grandkids. But I think what I try to teach, what I've always, with my first kids, I should say I was very strict. In a lot of ways, I didn't want to make a mistake. And I was still kind of in psycho mode. So I was a very heavy-handed, strict father. And they turned out well. They've had their seasons of rebellion, but they've turned out well. With the younger kids, I can tell you that they seem much cuter to me. I'm more in my element, part grandfather, part, since I had my son later in life, I'm part grandfather and part parent, right? So I become kinder and gentler. But I think what I drive into my children, I think if you were to ask them, they would say to think for yourself. Don't learn what to think, learn how to think. And I think one of the things they're missing from society right now, and you can turn on the news for 5 minutes and see it, is personal responsibility is gone, right? Everything is somebody else's fault. And a lot of things are somebody else's fault. But when I sit down with somebody to mentor them, what I generally hear the first hour is everybody else's problems. I hear about the cops. I hear about the wife. I hear about the judge. I hear about the parole officer. I hear about the kids. I hear about their boss. I hear about their coworkers. But I'm not in the business. I said, that's fine, but I'm not here to help them. I'm here to help you. What's your part in all of this? Personal responsibility. So in the 12 steps, I look at it this way. Steps 1, 2, and 3 are I can't, God can, I'm going to let him. Steps 4 through 9 are become a better person, to adapt the principles of recovery, to be honest and humble and these types of things. And so we clean our side of the street in steps 4 through 9. And then 10, 11, and 12, we keep it that way. We do a daily reflection. We pray every day, and we serve other people. And it's a pretty simple way to live your life. And I would say the only reason that people don't succeed is because they resist it, because they complicate what is really pretty easy. Or at least I did, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, and that's great, fascinating insight. And I know, one of the ways you give back is through the God Logic Project. And like I said, I mean, I've listened to hours of your conversations on that. I mean, you really have. I'm not going to say that you don't have a face for TV, because you do. You're quite a good-looking guy, Kevin, but you have a great radio voice as well. I think this is another calling of yours. But I like listening to your show. You get some great guests on there. There's a lot of different issues, and like you say, there's nothing really which is off the table from race, where we are now in American society across the world, to addiction, to politics. So maybe tell us a bit about the God Logic Project, how that got started, what's the sort of theme there, what are you trying to achieve with that project?
Well, it started out as an apologetics ministry, and apologetics is simply to be able to give a defense of your faith. So it's the science and the history behind the Gospels, basically. Proof of the resurrection, the historicity of the Bible, God and science, these types of things. And I started doing weekly and then monthly seminars on different topics, and including quantum physics. So there's nothing I won't talk about. And so
I'm talking about quantum physics.
Yeah,
there you go.
How crazy is that?
Yeah.
I dropped out of high school. I actually went back and went back to college after I quit drinking, which is pretty cool. I got a degree. So I stayed a plumber because that's where the money was. But so the God Logic Project started out just like it sounds. Is it logical to believe in God, and why is it? Can you give a reasonable defense for the hope that's inside you? 1 Peter 3:15. And it became I became disabled 4 years ago and had plenty of time to reflect and study. And so I wasn't getting around too well. I've had some surgeries and I'm doing better now, but I had time to really consider, and God put on my heart that I should somebody at one of my seminars said more people should hear the way you talk, should hear the things you say. And then the question and that stuck with me. So for weeks, I'm thinking to myself, how do I get more people to Holiday, Florida, this neighborhood, which is not a great neighborhood, at 8 o'clock at night on a Thursday night? How do you do that, right? You're not going to get more than 20 or 30 people to do that. And so I thought to myself, this has to be done on the internet, right? This has to be done on YouTube or something. So but my thought was to start this with somebody else doing it. You mentioned... You lied to me and said I had a wonderful, beautiful, handsome face, and you're not supposed to lie to a pastor. But perhaps I have a voice and a face made for radio.
I was going by the picture on your website, so that could be a bit old. I don't know.
Yeah. You're cut out for this clearly, but me, it's the voice, really. So my thought was to set this up for someone else, but it's me that thinks this way. It's me that talks this way, and maybe God talks through me this way to certain people. So, I got the idea. I had time to study, and you and I have talked off the air about audio and video techniques and things like that. And I became disabled. I was adjudicated disabled a couple of years ago, and used my back pay to build a podcast studio, which is pretty cool. And
it's a good place.
And I figured out how to do it. And I don't know that I do it as well. I think the strength of the God Logic Project is in the people that come in to talk to me, because these are real people. These aren't celebrities sitting here telling you their story. These are people that, and I've had guys in here that were serving 2 life sentences. I've had people in here that were tried to commit suicide in front of their parents for effect. I've had strippers and prostitutes, and I have, you talk about the race issues today. I've had people from both sides of that come in here and get upset with me talking about it. But the important part is we're talking about it. And that's kind of what the God Logic Project's become. Living in this world in what I believe is a post-Christian America, but maintaining a scriptural or biblical attitude for it. So that's kind of what the God Logic Project has become since then. So get over to youtube.com/God Logic Project and please subscribe.
I was going to give you a plug, but you got it in there. It's a true professional. And one of the things I was going to say about that, with social media and stuff, I mean, I'm bad that when I'm with my young sons, I'm often, on my phone, and it's really hard. But there's an addiction right there about being on the phones and stuff, Kevin, it is. But what social media really does, it connects people. I don't know if me and you are classed as friends or acquaintances, but we've spoken a few times off air. You've given me some advice. Hopefully I might be able to reciprocate it. And there's a friendship form of these things you'd never have before. You're getting the stories out there for the untold, really. Yeah. Maybe that's a new name for your next podcast, Kevin, is The Untold, if no one hasn't stolen it already.
Well, we might as well announce right now on the Who I Became podcast or vlogcast that I'm planning on having you on as a guest. So
I would love to be on there. Yeah.
So if we're friends now, you'll be tired of me by the time we've been on the God Logic project.
Well, sometimes it's nice to answer the questions rather than do what we're asking as well.
Yeah,
so that's good.
This is much easier than what you do. What you're doing.
It is. That is true. Hey, but one of the things, when you look back at your life, I mean, there's been a lot of success for your businesses that you've run where you've been very successful, to most probably your lowest paid position as a pastor, but your most
none.
but your most rewarding.
Certainly.
What's the one thing that you might look back and say, I really wish I'd done that thing differently, or wish I'd sort of changed then? What do you look back on in your life and reflect on the most?
Well, I don't know for sure, but I would suspect that if I was spiritually fit, like I hope I am now, 20 years ago, that I would not have had to go through the things that I've gone through. In other words, I think when I was making that serious money, I was spending it faster than I could, faster than most people, right? So we would go to a restaurant and eat with 10 people, and when dinner was over, I'd stand up and I'd take out a wad of money this big, make sure everybody in the restaurant and everybody at the table saw who had the money. So it was all ego driven, right? There was no humility at all. And I think because I was not God-centered or Christ-centered, I think God took those things away from me to teach me a lesson. The last time I got hurt, I was paralyzed. I mean, my son and I, the church put a roof over our heads and brought me food occasionally, but I thought I was broke until I actually went broke. So being a bad steward of money doesn't mean you're broke. Not having money is when you're broke, right?
Yeah.
So I got a real taste of what it was like to wonder how you're going to eat today, or to have to ask people to buy you food. So it's something I needed to learn, and it's not something I'm even still comfortable with probably now. But people. I think had I been spiritually fit back then, I would not have taken the beating that I had to take and learn the hard lessons that I've had to learn, except that these things weren't happening to me. I see now they were happening for me. So God was shaping me and molding me into what I hope he needs me to be today, at least today. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah. That's a good way to put it. And it was interesting that, at your lowest point when you had so little, you were saying you actually had so much, and now you've got your podcast and other stuff, and this
is the easiest version of Kevin I've ever had to be. It's a piece of cake being Kevin now.
And I can relate to you as well. Like I said, a lot of it, you really get into these different emotions with people. But, I'm the same, but I've always sort of wanted to have the desire to have more when actually, I really need less. It's focusing more on family, friends, and those things that matter. But it's hard. We're not necessarily wired that way. So Kevin, give yourself one last plug then. So how can people come and listen to the God Logic project and learn about you more?
Well, you can go to godlogicproject.com, which is on the shirt and on the wall. There you can link to all of our social media. Follow us, share our content on social media. The big platform for us is youtube.com/godlogicproject. You could also link there from the godlogicproject.com. And you can, by the way, if there's anything I could do to help people, either spiritually or in their addictive recovery, it be a chemical or emotional recovery. If you just have questions about recovery or you just need prayer, message me at godlogicproject.com. If I can help you, I have access to resources in the state of Florida particularly, but I get calls from all over the country, and I'll guide you in the right direction if I can. I'll never let you down, intentionally anyway. So if there's anything I can do to help anybody out there, godlogicproject.com, you can message me directly. I'll be the guy. I'm the host and the engineer and the producer and the director and the chief bottle washer. So I'm everybody. So you're bound to hear from me. I don't have any staff, but if I can help anybody in any way, that's kind of why we do this.
And Kevin, I'll put your links in the podcast notes so people can find that in there. So Kevin Haggerty, the pastor of Next Level Church in Tampa Bay, Florida, and founder of God Logic Project. Thank you for joining me today on Who I Became.
Hey, thank you for having me, buddy. I'm looking forward to having you on.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Take care.
All right, God bless.
Thank you for joining us for the Who I Became podcast. If you are enjoying the discussions between Simon and his guests, make sure to subscribe, rate, and review, as well as share with your friends on social media. Once again, thank you for joining the Who I Became podcast.